Hello guys, and welcome back to Leah's Lifestyle. We're back at it with 1983 Berkshire Hathaway Letters to Shareholders Part 2. So, without further ado, let's continue with the Buffalo Evening News. First, a clarification. Our corporate name is Buffalo Evening News, Inc., but the name of the newspaper, since we began a morning edition a little over a year ago, is Buffalo News. In 1983, the news somewhat exceeded its target profit margins of 10% after tax. Two factors were responsible. One, a state income tax cost that was subnormal because of a large loss carry forward, now fully utilized, and two, a large drop in the per ton cost of newsprint, an unanticipated fluke that will be reversed in 1984. Although our profit margins in 1983 were about average for newspapers such as the paper's performance, nevertheless, was a significant achievement considering the economic and retailing environment in Buffalo. Buffalo has a concentration of heavy industry, a segment of the economy that was hit particularly hard by the recent recession and that has lagged the recovery. As Buffalo consumers have suffered, so also have the papers retailing customers. Their numbers have shrunk over the past few years, and many of those surviving have cut their lineage. Within this environment, the news has one exceptional strength: its acceptance by the public, a matter measured by the paper's quote-unquote penetration ratio, the percentage of households within the community purchasing the paper each day. Our ratio is superb. From the 6 months ended September 30th, 1983, the news stood number one in weekday penetration among the 100 largest papers in the United States. The ranking is based on city zone numbers complied by the Audit Bureau of Circulations. In interrupting the standing, it is important to note that many large cities have two papers, and that in such cases, the penetration of either paper is necessarily lower than if there were a single paper, as in Buffalo. Nevertheless, the list of the 100 largest papers includes many that have a city to themselves. Among these, the News is at the top nationally, far ahead of many of the country's best-known dailies. Among Sunday editions of these same large dailies, the News ranked numbers 3 in penetration, 10 to 20 percentage points ahead of many well-known papers. It was not always this way in Buffalo. Below, we show Sunday circulation in Buffalo in the years prior to 1977 compared with the present period. In that earlier period, the Sunday paper was the Courier Express. The News was not publishing a Sunday paper. Now, of course, it is the News. Average Sunday circulation, starting with 1970 to go into 1976. 1970, 314,000. 1971, 306,000. 72, 302,000. 73, 2,900,000. 74, 278,000, 75, 269,000, 76, 270,000. 1984, current, 376,000. We believe a paper's penetration ratio to be the best measure of the strength of its franchise. Paper with unusually high penetration in the geographic area that is of prime interest to major local retailers, and with relatively little circulation elsewhere, are exceptionally efficient buys for those retailers. Low penetration papers have far less compelling messages to present to advertisers. In our opinion, 3 factors largely account for the unusual acceptance of the news in the community. Among these, points 2 and 3 also may explain the popularity of the Sunday News compared to that of the Sunday Courier Express when it was the sole Sunday paper. 1. The first point has nothing to do with merits of the news. Both immigration and immigration are relatively low in Buffalo. A stable population is more interested and involved in the activities of its community than is a shifting population, and as a result is more interested in the content of the local daily paper, increasing the movement in and out of a city, and penetration ratios will fall. 2. The news has a reputation for editorial quality and integrity that was honed by our longtime editor, the legendary Alfred Kirchhoffer, and that has been preserved and extended by Mary Light. This reputation was enormously important to our success in establishing a Sunday paper against enriched competition. And without a Sunday edition, the news would not have survived in the long run. 3. The news lives up to its name. It delivers a very unusual amount of news. During 1983, our quote-unquote news hole, editorial material, not ads, amounted to 50% of the newspaper's content, excluding pre-printed inserts. Among papers that dominate their market and that are of comparable or large size, we know of only one whose news holds percentage exceeds that of the news. Comprehensive figures are not available, but a sample indicates an average percentage in the high 30s. In other words, page for page, our mix gives readers over 25% more news than the typical paper. This news-rich mixture is by intent. Some publishers publish for higher profit margins, have cut their news holes during the past decade. We have maintained ours and will continue to do so, properly written and edited. A full serving of news makes our paper more valuable to the reader and contributes to our unusually penetrated ratio. Despite the strength of the news franchise, gains in ROP lineage, advertising printed within the newspaper pages as constrained to pre-printing inserts are going to be very difficult to achieve. We had enormous gain in preprints during 1983. Lines rose from 9.3 million to 16.4 million. Revenues from 3.6 million to 8.1 million. These gains are consistent with national trends, but exaggerated in our case by businesses we picked up when the Courier Express closed. On balance, the shift from ROP to preprints has negative economic implications for us. Profitability on preprint is less, and the business is more subject to competition from alternative means of delivery. Furthermore, a reduction in ROP lineage means less about space devoted to news, since the news hole percentage remains consistent, thereby reducing the utility of the paper to the reader. Stan Limpsey became publisher of the Buffalo News in mid-year upon the retirement of Henry Urban. Henry never flinched during the dark days of litigation and losses following our introduction of the Sunday paper, an introduction whose wisdom was questioned by many in the newspaper business, including some within our own building. Henry is admired by the Buffalo business community, he's admired by all who worked for him, and he is admired by Charlie and me. Stan worked with Henry for several years and has worked for Berkshire Hathaway since 1969. He has been personally involved in all nuts and bolts aspects of the newspaper business, from editorial to circulation. We couldn't do better. See's Candy Shop. The financial results of See's continues to be exceptional. The business possesses a valuable and solid consumer franchise and a manager equally valuable and solid. In recent years, See's has encountered two important problems, at least one of which is well on its way towards solution. The problem concerns costs, except those for raw materials. We have enjoyed a break on raw material cost in recent years though, so, of course, have our competitors. One of these days we will get a nasty surprise in the opposite direction. In effect, raw material costs are largely beyond our control, since we will, as matter of course, buy the finest ingredients that we can, regardless of change in their price levels. We regard product quality as sacred. But other kinds of costs are more controllable, and it is in this area that we have problems. On a per pound basis, our costs, not including those for raw materials, have increased in the last few years at a rate significantly greater than the increase of the general price level. It is vital to our competitive position and profit potential that we reverse this trend. In recent months, much better control over cost has been attained, and we feel certain that our rate of growth in these costs in 1984 will be below the rate of inflation. This confidence arises out of our long experience with the managerial talents of Chuck Huggs. We put Chuck in charge the day we took over, and his record has been simply extraordinary, as shown by the following table. Okay, in this table, they have 52 to 53 week year and about December 31, and they have it from 1983 to 1972. They have revenue, sales, operating profit after tax, number of pounds of candy sold, and number of stores opened at year end. And it looks like from 1972 to 1983, numbers of stores have increased from 1972 being 167 to in 1983 being 207. And each year they've added a few. It looks like there's no year where it stayed the same. And then in 1972, the number of pounds of candy sold was 16,954,000. And in 1983, they have 24,651,000. Operating profits after tax in 1972 was 2,083,000. In 1983 is 13,699,000. And sales and revenues in 1972 was 31,337,000, and now is 133,531,000 in 1983. Okay. And then back to reading. The other problem we faced, as the table suggests, is our recent inability to achieve meaningful gains in pounds sold. The industry has the same problem, but for many years we outperformed the industry in this respect, and now we are not. The poundage volume in our retail stores has been virtually unchanged each year from the past 4, despite small increases every year in the same number of shops and in distributing expenses as well. Of course, dollar volume has increased because we have raised purchases significantly, but we regard the most important measure of retail trends to be units sold per store rather than dollar volume. On a same-store basis, counting only shops open through both years, with all figures adjusted to a 52-week year, poundage was down 0.8 of 1% during 1983. The small decline was our best same-store performance since 1979. The cumulative decline since then has been about 8%. Quantity order volume, about 25% of our total, has plateaued in recent years, following very large poundage gains through the 1970s. We are not sure to what extent this flat volume, both in retail shop areas and the quantity order area, is due to our pricing policies and to what extent is due to statistic industry volume, the recession, and the extraordinary share of markets we already enjoy in our primary marketing area. Our price increase for 1984 is much more modest than has been the case in the past few years, and we hope that the next year we can report better volume figures to you, but we have no basis to forecast these. Despite the volume problem, C's strengths are many and important. In our primary marketing area, the West, our candy is preferred by an enormous margin to that of any competitor. In fact, we believe most lovers of chocolate prefer it to candy costing 2 or 3 times as much. In candy, as it stocks, price and value can differ. Price is what you give, value is what you get. The quality of customer service in our shops, operating through the country by us and not by franchises, is every bit as good as the product. Cheerful, hopefully personal, are such much a trademark of C's as is the logo on the box. That's no small achievement in a business that requires us to hire about 200,000 seasonal workers. We know of no comparable size organization that betters the quality of customer service delivered by Chuck Huggins and his associates. Because we have raised the prices so modestly in 1984, we expect C's profits this year to be about the same as in 1983. Insurance-controlled operations. We both operate insurance companies and have a large economic interest in the insurance business we don't operate, Geico. The results for all can be summed up easily. In aggregate, the companies we operate and whose underwriting results reflect the consequences of decisions that were my responsibility a few years ago had absolutely terrible results. Fortunately, Geico, whose policies I do not influence, simply shot the lights out. The inference you draw from this summary is the correct one. I made some serious mistakes a few years ago that came home to roost. The industry had its worst underwriting year in a long time, as indicated by the table below. And we read this one, I think, in the last 3, and anything over 100 means that they lost. And again, in 1982 and 1983, they lost. It was 109.7 and 111, which their yearly change in premiums written was 4.4 and 4.6. Sources: best aggregate and averages. Best data reflects the experience of practically the entire industry, including stocks, mutual, and reciprocal companies. The combined ratio represents total insurance costs, losses incurred plus expenses, compared to revenue from premiums. A ratio below 100 indicates an underwriting profit, and one above 100 indicates a loss. For the reasons outlined in last year's report, we expect the poor industry experience of 1983 to be more or less typically for a good many years to come. As Yogi Berra puts it, quote, "It will be deja vu all over again," end quote. That does not mean we think the figures won't bounce around a bit. They are certain to. But we believe it highly unlikely that the combined ratio during the balance of the decade will average significantly below the 1981 to 1983 level, based on our expectations regarding inflation, and we are as pessimistic as ever on that front. Industry premium volumes must grow about 10% annually merely to stabilize loss ratios at present levels. Our own combined ratio in 1983 was 121. Since Mike Goldberg recently took over most of the responsibilities for the insurance operations, it would be nice for me if our shortcomings could be placed at his doorstep rather than mine. But unfortunately, as we have often pointed out, the insurance business has a long lead time. Though business policies may be changed and personnel improved, a significant period must pass before the effects are seen. This characteristic of the business enabled us to make a great deal of money in Geico. We could picture that was likely to happen well before it actually occurred. So the roots of the 1983 results are operating and personnel decisions made 2 or more years back when I had directed managerial responsibilities for the insurance group. Despite our poor results overall, several of our managers did truly outstanding jobs. Roland Miller guided the auto and general liability businesses of National Indemnity Company and National Fire and Marine Insurance Company to improve results, while those of the competitors deteriorated. In addition, Tom Rowley at Continental Divide Insurance, our fledgling Colorado homestead company, seems certain to be a winner. Mike found him a little over a year ago, and he was an important acquisition. We have become active recently and hope to become much more active in reinsurance transitions where the buyer's overriding concern should be the seller's long-term creditworthiness. In such transactions, our premier financial strength should make us the number one choice for both clients and insurers who must rely on their reinsurers' promises for a great many years to come. A major source of such businesses in structured settlements, a procedure for settling losses under which calamities receive a periodic payment, almost always monthly for life, rather than a single lump sum settlement. This form of settlement has important tax advantages for the claimant and also prevents his squandering a large lump sum payment. Frequently, some inflation protection is built into the settlement. Usually, the claimant has been seriously injured, and thus the periodic payments must be unquestionably secure for decades to come. We believe we offer unparalleled security. No other insurer we know of, even those with much larger gross assets, has our financial strength. We also think our financial strength should recommend us to companies wishing to transfer loss reserves. In such transactions, other insurance companies pay a lump sum to assume all or a specified portion of future loss payments applicable to large blocks of expired business. Here also, the company transferring such claims needs to be certain of the transferee's financial strength for many years to come. Again, most of our competitors soliciting such business appear to us to have a financial condition that is materially inferior to ours. Potentially, structured settlements and the assumption of loss reserves could become very significant to us because of their proportional size and because these operations generate large amounts of investment income compared to premium volumes. We will show underwriting results from those businesses on separate line in our insurance segment data. We also will exclude their effect in reporting our combined ratio to you. We, quote, front end, end quote, no profit of unstructured settlement are loss reserves transactions, and all attribute overhead is expensed currently. Both businesses are run by Don Wurst and at National Endowment Company. Insurance Geico. Geico's performance during 1983 was as good as our own. Insurance performance was poor. Compared to the industry combined ratio of 111, Geico wrote at 96 after a large voluntary accrual from policyholders' dividends. A few years ago, I would not have thought Geico could so greatly outperform the industry. Its superiority reflects the combination of a truly exceptional business idea and an exceptional management. Jack Bry and Bill Steidner have maintained extraordinary discipline in the underwriting area, including crucially provisions for full and proper loss reserves, and their efforts are now being further rewarded by significant gains in new business. Equally important, Louis Simpson is the class of the field among insurance investment managers. The three of them are some team. We have approximately a 1/3 interest in Geico. That gives us a 270 million share in the company's premium volume, an amount some 80% larger than our own volume. Thus, the major portion of our total insurance businesses comes from the best insurance book in the country. This fact does not moderate by any iota the need for us to improve our own operations. Stock spills and stock activities. We often are asked why Berkshire does not split its stock. The assumption behind this question usually appears to be that a split would be a pro-shareholder action. We disagree. Let me tell you why. One of our goals is to have Berkshire Hathaway stock sell at a price rationally related to its intrinsic business value, but not rationally related, not identical. If well-regarded companies are generally selling in the market at large discounts from value, Berkshire might well be priced similarly. We key a rational stock price is rational shareholders, both current and prospective. If the holders of a company stock and or a prospective buyers attracted to it are prone to make irrational or emotional decisions, some pretty silly stock prices are going to appear periodically. Manic depressive personalities produce manic depressive valuations. Some aberrations may help us in buying and selling the stocks of other companies, and we think it is in both your interest and ours to minimize their occurrence in the market for Berkshire. To obtain only high-quality shares is no cinch. Mrs. Estor could select her 400, but anyone can buy any stock entering members of a shareholder club cannot be screened for intellectual capacity, emotional stability, and moral sensitivity or acceptable dress. Shareholders' eugenics, therefore, might appear to be a hopeless undertaking. In large, however, we feel that high-quality ownership can be attracted and maintained if we consistently communicate our business and ownership philosophy, along with no other conflicting message, and then let self-selected follow its course. For example, self-selected will draw a far different crowd to a musical event advertised as an open opera than one advertised as a rock concert, even though anyone can buy a ticket to either. Through our policies and communication, our advertisements, we try to attract investors who will understand our operations, attitudes, and exceptions. And fully as important, we try to discuss those who won't. We want those who think of themselves as business owners and invest in companies with the intention of staying a long time. And we want those who keep their eyes focused on business results, not market prices. Investors possessing those characteristics are in a small minority, but we have an exceptional collection of them. I believe well over 90%, probably over 95%, of our shares are held by those who were shareholders of Berkshire or Blue Chip 5 years ago. And I would guess that over 95% of our shares are held by investors for whom the holding is at least double the size of their next largest. Among companies with at least several thousand public shareholders and more than $1 billion of our market value, we are almost certainly the leader. In the degree to which our shareholder thinks and acts like owners, upgrading a shareholder group that possesses these characteristics is not easy. Were we to split the stock or take other actions focusing on stock prices rather than business value, we would attract an entering class of buyers inferior to the existing class of sellers. At $1,300, there are very few investors who can't afford a Berkshire share. Would a potential one share purchase be better off if we split 100 for one so he could buy 100 shares? Those who think so and who would buy the stock because of the split or in anticipation of one would definitely downgrade the quality of our present shareholder group. Could we really improve our shareholder group by trading some of our present clear-thinking members for impressionable new ones who preferred paper to value, feel whether within $10 bills than with one $100 bill? People who buy for non-value reasons are likely to sell for non-value reasons. Their presence in the picture will accentuate erratic behavior swings unrelated to underlying business development. We will try to avoid policies that attract buyers with a short-term focus on our stock price and try to follow policies that attract informed long-term investors focusing on business values. Just as you purchase your Berkshire share in a market populated by rational, informed investors, you deserve a chance to sell should you ever want to. In the same kind of market, we will work to keep it in existence. One of the ironies of the stock market is the emphasis of activity. Brokers who use terms such as marketability and liquidity, since the phrase of companies with high share turnover, those who cannot fill your pocket will confidently fill your ear. But investors should understand that what is good for the croper is not good for the customer. Hyperactive stock market is the pickpocket of enterprise. For example, Consider a typical company earning, say, 12% on equity. Assume a very high turnover rate in its share of 100% per year. If a purchase and sale of the stock each extract commission of 1%, the rate may be much higher on low-price stocks, and if the stock trades at book value, the owner of our hypothetical company will pay, in aggregate, 2% of company's net worth annually for the privilege of transferring ownership. This activity does nothing for the earnings of the business and means that 1/6 of them are lost to the owners through the fractional costs of the transfer. And this calculation does not count option trading, which would increase fractional cost still further. All that makes for a rather expensive game of musical chairs. Can you imagine the agony cry that would rise if a government unit were to impose a new 16 2/3 tax on earnings of corporations or investors by market activity? Investors can impose upon themselves the equivalent of such a tax. Days when the market trades 100 million shares, and that kind of volume, when over-the-counter trading is included, is totally abnormally low, are a curse for owners, not a blessing for them, for they mean that owners are paying twice as much to change chairs as they are on a 50 million share day. If 100 million share day persists for a year and the average cost on each purchase and sale is 15 cents a share, the chair change tax for investors in aggregate would total about $7.5 billion, an amount roughly equal to the combined 1982 profits of Exxon, General Motors, Mobil, and Texaco, the 4 largest companies in the Fortune 500. These companies had a combined net worth of $75 billion at year-end 1982 and accounted for over 12% of both net worth and net income of the entire Fortune 500 list. Under our assumption, investors in aggregate every year forfeit all earnings from this staggering sum of capital merely to satisfy their penchant for financial flip-flopping. In addition, investment management fees of over $2 billion annually, some pays for chair-changing advice, required the forfeiture by investors of all earnings of the 5 largest banking organizations: Citicorp, Bank America, Chase Manhattan, Manufacturer Hanover, and J.P. Morgan. These expensive activities may decide who eats the pie, but they don't enlarge it. We are aware of the pie expanding argument that says that such activities improve the rationality of the capital allocation process. We think that this argument is suspicious and that, on balance, hyperactive equity markets subvert rational capital allocations and act as pie shrinkers. Adam Smith felt that all the non-conclusive acts in a free market were guided by an invisible hand that led an economy to maximize progress. Our view is that casino-type markets and hair-trigger investment management act as an invisible foot that trips up and slows down a forward-moving economy. Contrast the hyperactive stock with Berkshire. The bid and ask spread in our stock currently is about 30 points, or a little over 2%, depending on the size of the transaction. The difference between proceeds received by the seller of Berkshire and cost of the buyer may range downward from 4%, and trading involved only a few shares, to perhaps 1.5%. In large traders, where negotiation can reduce both the market maker's spread and the broker's commission, because most Berkshire shares are trading in fairly large transactions, the spread on all trading probably does not average more than 2%. Meanwhile, true turnover in Berkshire stock, excluding interior dealer transactions, gifts, and bequeaths, probably runs 3% per year. Thus, our owners, in aggregate, are paying perhaps 6 over 100 of 1% of Berkshire's market value annually for transfer privileges. But this very rough estimate, that's 900,000. Not a small cost, but far less than average. Splitting the stock would increase that cost, downgrade the quality of our shareholder population, and encourage a market price less consistently related to intrinsic business value. We see no offset advantages. Miscellaneous. Last year, in this section, I ran a small ad to encourage acquisition candidates in our communication business. We tell our advertisers that repetition is a key to results, which it is. So we will again repeat our acquisition here. We prefer one large purchase. Okay, so we read this last time, the things that they wanted. We will not engage in unfriendly takeovers. We read that last time. About 96.4% of eligible shareholders participated in our 1983 shareholder design contribution program. We talked about this once as well. They have that contribution program where, blue chip Berkshire merge went off without a hitch. Less than 1/10 of 1% of our shares of each company voted against the merger, and no requests for appraisals were made. In 1983, we gained some tax efficiency from the merger, and we expect to gain more in the future. One interesting sideline to the merger: Berkshire now has 1,146,909 shares of outstanding compared to 1,137,778 shares at the beginning of the fiscal 1965. The year present management assumed responsibility for every 1% of the company you owed at the time. You now would own 9.99%. Thus, all of today's assets, the News, Seas, Nebraska's Fortune Mart, and Insurance Group, 1.3 billion in market stocks, etc., have been added to the original textiles assets with virtually no net dilution to our original owners. We are delighted to have the former blue chip shareholders join us to aid in your understanding of Berkshire Hathaway. We will be glad to send you the and then he says where you can send it. March 14th, 1984, Warren E. Buffett, chairman of the board. This is something that has not been a part of any of the past. It says Appendix, Berkshire Hathaway, Goodwill and its amortization, the rules and the realities. Okay. It is flooping long. It is so long. I don't even know. It's so tiny. But it is so long. And I was half thinking about reading it, but now that I'm looking at it, like, it's a good third of what was already written. So I'm not going to read it, but just know that there's an appendix down here that you could read. And I think it just has, the appendix deals only with economics and accounting goodwill, not the goodwill of everyday use. For example, the business is so hard to, here's the thing, is I can't read it because when I fully scroll out so that, like, the lines match, so I can read from left to right, it's so tiny. It's like pencil. It's like someone scraped a tiny pencil across the screen. So I can't even read it. I can only read like a little section of it. So yeah, I think I'm not sure it's worth trying to read. But yeah, if you want to go look at that appendix, maybe there's something in there and you could tell me, like, yes, Leah. Actually, in fact, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit that bell icon down below so that way you know every time when I post. And leave a comment down below. Would you like me to read this appendix? If so, leave a little like, yes, please. We want you to read that. Please copy paste and make it bigger so you can read it to us. And it will be like a whole nother thing. I'll make a whole nother part 3 reading the appendix of 1993. And also, leave a little comment down below. How did you guys feel about this one? There was a few things in here I want to kind of go over again and remember, and because there's a few things I really enjoyed of this one, so I hope you guys did too. And until next time. Bye.